you, Jakob. Especially I would like to focus on the question that is in the program and that we have asked to many of you, that is an outlook to what is ahead of us. And I suggest, as Jakob mentioned, that we also use the session, as we're also just running slightly behind schedule, that we also use the session to then sum up the conference as a whole. I invite you to use that session in that regard as well. And to think about this, let me just open my presentation and also the... Well, what we were asking you is two things. The next 5 years in carbon and environmental footprinting, what do you expect and what do you wish for? And to help us enter this question together, I just quickly put together a couple of impressions for the past 5 years. And this is by no means complete, because I know even in this room and even at this very summit, we learned about a lot of examples, a lot of initiatives that have emerged over the past 5 years that actually very much shape our thinking. So this is just a linear thinking, like some of the highlights. That's how also I kind of noticed them over the past 5 years. And when we think back, in 2006, which is exactly 5 years ago, I think it was in September 2006, you may remember that there was this slideshow movie by Al Gore really entering the public domain, a lot of people recognizing it, a lot of attention that it was creating, which my personal observation very much sparked off more of a public understanding and debate on climate change, which was before 2006 still limited to an interested audience, people that were somehow involved in, well, more directly in climate change, environmental issues. And that kind of widened the audience, not just alone. There was then directly following afterwards, I think it was in October 2006, the Stern Review on the Economics of Climate Change, which helped to complement this public input to the debate by a more scientific, economic approach to put it into perspective. What does climate change actually cost, and that it costs much more to not do anything about it than to act about it. And so this was like an economic, political perspective. And one that is perhaps a more personal viewpoint, but I also felt was a very important kind of milestone, at least here in Germany, was that the UK environmental minister came to Berlin for a speech here where she linked or emphasized the importance of climate change for global security issues. So climate change was then entering even already a discussion on global security in, well, across the world, so more from a foreign relations point of view in terms of resources, security, and so on. And all this happened in a time span of 2 months or so. And so it was like an almost concerted effort to bring attention to climate change into the public domain. And what I felt afterwards, it kind of sparked off a lot of activities in different ways, not just on the corporate level, very much also at least trying on the political level, but especially concerning our efforts that we were discussing very much over the past 5 years. We saw a first draft for a carbon footprint methodology, so more especially dedicated at climate change by the Carbon Trust. In fact, Ewan Murray, that was with us yesterday, who took that effort from really the perspective of a supply chain carbon accounting perspective to come up with something to make emissions in supply chains measurable and understandable. And that then triggered a lot of different developments. We heard an announcement by Tesco, very bold announcement in the beginning, which was then refined, I would say, later on, that they would sooner or later label all of their products with carbon footprints, complemented by the announcement of the Carbon Trust to introduce a label was in beginning 2007 that they announced it, and they then implemented, I think it was in March or April 2007, actually when kind of this labeling debate started, and led then over, of course, a longer process to the necessity to create actually an underlying more robust standard for these kinds of activities. So the PAS 2050 was published in 2008, and parallel to this, for example, here in Germany, we had a very intense discussion also on what is it possible to measure the climate impact of products or not, what would be the basis, what do we think of PAS 2050, what recommendations would we give, and published this pretty much at the same time as the first PAS 2050 came out with like input to the international and also national discussion. And this then sparked off the whole development around international standards, the demand for international standards, the demand for some global common agreement on how we actually account for greenhouse gas emissions. The Greenhouse Gas Protocol Initiative, at that time with the old logo, of course, was then starting their enormous stakeholder process to come up with a global methodology. ISO, the same thing, like for different markets, but also with their historical backgrounds, both had to do, I think, something in this regard, which was then, as we know, like very much a parallel process. We also learned more closely that in France already development in this regard more on not just carbon, broader environmental impacts, but with carbon at the heart, was kicking off a lot of preliminary developments and thinking on methodology that were kind of independent of these developments, but kind of complementing the overall picture. And heard other announcements by other global retailers how they would like to address it, or how important it is to address greenhouse gas emissions in the value chain, and finding approaches to do so, engaging with suppliers, and supporting actually methodology development for that purpose. And now, and this is like almost then the end, because this is where we are now, with the first international standard with the large stakeholder process behind, published by the Greenhouse Gas Protocol for product lifecycle accounting, of course also for Scope 3 value chain accounting, which is very closely related. The revised PAS 2050, reflecting our discussion on international harmonization. That is, I think, still an issue, but I think also we see some new input into that discussion. And now also what we learned, the development around an environmental footprinting methodology. So this was a very quick snapshot of 5 years of development around carbon footprinting, coming from a global climate change point of view. And of course, I let out of this equation or that presentation here a lot of the developments in the other countries that we learned about: Japan, Korea, New Zealand with their strategy, Sweden with the climate certification approach, and many more actually. And the question now to you is, and I invite you that we think a bit about, broaden our thinking, like with this in mind, what happened over the past 5 years, what do we actually expect, what will happen in the next 5 years, and what should perhaps happen, or what do we wish for? And what I would like to do to start that off, I took a look at the video statements that some of you have given, and kind of put them quickly together, some statements that I received, and I will also show a couple of examples quickly. And some responses that you gave, what do you expect, is that the topic will get more important with a lot of organizations working on it, that there will be more of a global focus in this debate with a very much a lot of dispersed developments taking place so far, so that there's more global thinking around some of this. That we should have or will have a more global view on what actually constitutes a good product and what not, an answer that is still very difficult for us to give after 5 years of work, which of course also still depends on further harmonization of standards, that there's perhaps still a confusion for companies and users to decide on which method actually to use. If they want to do something, how do they get started? That there may still be a confusion around that. And then we see a growth. Second, still what do you expect? Further methodologies for other environmental impacts beside carbon, developing with CO2, a lot of ground or basic work that has been accomplished, that this will be extended, more multi-criteria approaches, but still also considering carbon as a valuable proxy for, of course, many of the other environmental indicators. That actually public opinion will probably more recognize these invisible impacts that we discuss about a lot that get forgotten, and that a majority of people becomes very conscious of the importance of a life cycle perspective and looking at different environmental impacts. And some wishes you mentioned so far were, as a consumer, to be aware, be well informed, with the right information, whatever that exactly may be, to make the right decisions, that it is easy at a glance to make such a decision, and that we could also come up with one communication forward, one communication format on a global level for a global label for carbon footprinting, if carbon footprinting is used. Consistent data quality, that it's less complex, less scientific, more pragmatic, easy. A lot of people recognize the concept, and that it is not only a ex-ante assessment, ex-post assessment, but also ex-ante, so before product development in the design process to actually come to better products. And to quickly show 2 examples. I hope it's working now with, you may want to stop downloading any videos at the moment.
I think we will see a lot of development of companies doing footprinting studies of their products, publishing about it, using the information in marketing, trying to compare with other suppliers, other technologies. Also maybe using, like we are doing already, the product carbon footprinting or the product eco-footprinting in selection of options in raw material selection, in product development. So it will really be a lot of use.
So we have like the call for harmonization that is still important. Let me see if I find it again.
I do hope that there will be, there's a lot of work going on, and I do hope that that there will be some progress towards a uniform, more standardized way of actually implementing these different standards and results. To be clearer and easier to understand for the market, the consumer market.
So there's still this drive for harmonization, but also on a different level, like to bring it to a new level, which I think we already felt like yesterday and today, to actually make it work in a more pragmatic way.
For me at the moment it seems to be like this, that the product carbon footprint is a very scientific approach, and for our company, for Merck with its special chemicals, I hope that the future approach will be a more pragmatic one. We have 40 or 50,000 different products, and so the effort to assess product carbon footprint or life cycle analysis would be huge, and therefore I hope we get a pragmatic, simple approach to do these assessments.
Okay, and with this, just very quick examples, I invite you again to take a look at it yourself. I mean, also on the other questions, I would like to invite you to provide your ideas, what is ahead of us.
From the consumer point of view, and these are just things that I've been seeing in my work. From the consumer point of view, climate has not been on the top of agenda for some time. It was quite in focus a couple of years ago, and it's still quite a strong environmental question. But now, when we speak to the trend analysts, it's all taste, quality, local, also sound food security. No additives or chemicals. That's on the top of the mind of the consumer. Sustainability for those consumers who are enlightened and know something about what they're buying, sustainability is regarded as a hygiene factor, which has implications for what we are doing and how we are communicating. Will this putting a label on the package actually be something that is practical for the future, or will we move towards a business-to-business communication with the declarations and the footprints? We might be seeing a development in that direction. Also, I wanted to bring up the willingness to pay. That is uncertain. We don't know, and we don't clearly see that this is a motivating factor. And as I was speaking about before, we have an enormous obstacle in form of those people who will actually be doing the reductions. The producers who would be producing with lower impact, and the consumer who would be buying the products with the lower impact. So the price and the economics behind that is not clear. And that's what we should be working on the next couple of years to overcome this obstacle. For corporate issues, sustainability becomes more and more of a hygiene factor. It becomes hard to not do something in that area. We were just discussing in the break here about the retail sector, how important they are as the in between the producer and the consumer. And we who are here right now are mostly standards developing people, but we need also to have quite strong development in the retail sector. And that has also its inherent problems. Financing, as I was saying before, is quite important to get over that obstacle also. And from our point of view, many of the suggestions in climate reductions we suggest are not so very flamboyant. It has to do with changing light bulbs. It's not something that you communicate very easily. And also, it probably won't meet the needed reductions. And I would like to lift an example from this hamburger chain. I don't think that they have been here to present, but they could very well be such a presenter, because it's a hamburger chain in Sweden. They have quite a local profile. Their name is Max. They also have an M as a symbol. And they, a couple of years ago, they calculated a carbon footprint for all their products in the whole menu. And they put that up on the, when you buy the hamburgers, you can see if it's 1.8, or they have big ones for 3.3 kilos of carbon dioxide. And they have vegetarian ones for 0.7 kilo of carbon dioxide. And they do two other things which are important. They also climate compensate all their including the primary production, and they actively say that you should eat less meat. And that's quite innovative for a hamburger chain to start communicating and pulling out the carpet under the feet from themselves, in a sense. So my last point here is downsizing, and that's something that is coming more and more as a trend, actually, when you're looking at the clothes industry and the second-hand stores that are going up like this. So patience, persistence, and downsizing, that's what I would like to see in the next couple of 5 years.
Yes. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Maita Villafan, and I work for DNV Climate Change. DNV is a verification and certification body from Norway. We are global, and we have more than 150 auditors qualified for climate change and environmental services. So I've prepared a very small presentation, only 2 slides, like it was asked also. There was already a very exhaustive list of points that you have presented. I only took 1 point. So what do we expect to see in the next 5 years with respect to product carbon footprint or product environmental footprint? We believe there will be an increased comparability between the products. That means that the companies will more and more use this tool as a differentiating factor, as a marketing tool. This is what we believe and what we start to see, I believe, also. What we also believe is that it can only happen if it goes in parallel with more credibility in the figures that are presented. So I'm very impressed by what the French government has been put in place in France so far. In the meantime, I'm a bit surprised that there are today products on the market with figures that haven't been verified or controlled by anyone but the company itself. As a verified, I look, that's strange that there is no third party to check and to control these figures, because then the customer, what is the transparency and the credibility for the customer? I don't know. So this is what we see. And the last slide is what we do not wish to see in the 5 years. Maybe you know this small chart, how standards proliferate. There is always a good basis there. There are people who say, oh, there are 14 standards. We should try to have this standard, the global one. At the end, there are 15 standards. So this is true not only for the standards, but also for the scheme and for the product category rules, like we have seen yesterday. There are product category rules that are started to be created in different countries and in different schemes. I expect to see harmonization there for everybody, for the clients, for the consultant, and for the verifiers. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Ricardo Teixeira, and I'm happy that the Swedish people do everything they're supposed to. I'm Portuguese, we do nothing we're supposed to do. But I decided to break that rule and also prepare this small presentation. Thank you so much for the opportunity. I work for Blue Horse Associates. We are a tool developer based in Paris, in France. We are specific to the food sector, and we work mainly with SMEs, so I hope I'll be bringing you kind of a different perspective on this issue. First thing that we believe that's going to happen is that some form of PCF or PEF will become mandatory in the next 5 years. It's kind of unavoidable. At least the first attempt will probably be put in place. Will it be country-specific, or will it be for Europe? Who knows? Here's hoping. Companies will incorporate PCF into their day-to-day operations, and you may think this is a bit hopeful, but we believe that this can be a good entry door for PCF into companies. Companies more and more believe that doing this may not only be compliance, it may also bring them some advantages. However, in order to do that and to completely convince them of that, there has to be some kind of alignment of standards. I was very happy to see in this event that steps are already being taken into that direction. We really have to avoid the trap of every time we want to create a standard to rule them all, we just create one more standard. And this is, as was mentioned in the last presentation, this is true for PCRs, it's true for everything. This standard that will rule them all also has to assimilate and to assume and to admit that what's best for some uses of PCF may not be best for other uses. When we talk about comparability, well, lots of people are not really using product carbon footprinting for external reporting. And those people may end up having to work with something that's kind of like fitting a square peg in a round hole. They have this great standard that's great for eco-labeling, but to their own use, it only makes matters worse, it only complicates it more. What we hope for, well, the first thing we hope for is bigger, better, and more databases. I know, and I think everybody knows, that creating standards or creating tools is sexy, is catchy. Data is often seen as a minor activity in all of this, but it's a crucial part of any assessment. We did two things in the beginning of the year. One was a review of LCA tools that are available for the food sector. We found out that there are more than 100, or there were more than 100 when we just stopped and quit, because there's really so many tools out there that practitioners can choose from. But then we also found out that about 90% of them use the exact same data. We need more data, we need to complement. There are severe lacks right now, and I think this is the main challenge that we will have in the next 5 years. And this is also what practitioners complain about, because the other thing we did was a practitioner survey, and the two main obstacles to a widespread application of PCF were, on the first place, time and resources that it takes to compile primary data, and on the second place, quality assurance in secondary data. We also need some kind of common repository for information. Today, when we want to know what kind of scientific studies are out there about anything, you go to Scholar, Google, or you use the Web of Knowledge, and you know it. If you want to know what kind of PCRs are there for apples, you have no idea unless you come to all of these events and you know the people. If you want to know what kind of data is out there for apples, I'm not saying the exact numbers, I'm just saying if there is a data provider that has information for apples, you also have no real easy way of knowing. So in terms of data and PCRs, we are kind of as we were many years ago, or so I'm told, for scientific papers where people actually had to use libraries. So thank you very much for this opportunity. Thank you.
So being half Swedish, half German, I also did what I was supposed to do. It's kind of the double whammy then, isn't it? Because the Germans are a bit like that as well. What do I expect over the next few years? I came here to learn because I would not consider myself an expert in the field. It's more my colleagues that are experts. I've learned a lot, and maybe sometimes it's also helpful if you don't have too much detailed knowledge yourself, but can try to see hopefully see a bit of the big picture. I would say that I would expect progress towards global alignment in standards. I wouldn't say that's wishful thinking. I think all the discussions have shown that will be almost inevitable in order to make real progress in execution and in driving the agenda. And one thing would probably be the suggestion to move from PCF to PEF, PCF being a good starting point, but PEF being the bigger picture. And the third thing is that I think that there will be a lot of progress in terms of communication and labeling in all major consumer markets. I think the French market is the experimentation there will give a lot of insights, provide a lot of insights, and I hope that the French we'll share that with all other countries, hopefully. A lot will be visible in the market, and there are in a lot of countries, there are things going on. I saw things that happened in Israel. I saw things from Sweden, Germany. So there is a lot of work going to be going on in the area of communication and trying to make or create communication that on the one hand makes sense to consumers and motivates consumers. There, I really love the green card from Korea because it gives a real incentive to consumers. And on the other hand, helps pushing for reduction in carbon emissions overall. And I also think in terms of communication, I think that the carbon footprinting is kind of a spearhead for sustainable consumption overall, because if you manage to make one aspect of sustainable consumption really relevant to consumers, that will also help us to find ways to communicate other aspects of sustainability to consumers that actually will drive consumption and make it more attractive. What do I wish for? I would wish for, from the first day, from the PCR workshop, there was the idea of a clearinghouse for PCR. So that resonates very much with what was your name? Ricardo, what you said, Ricardo, is pretty much the same thing. That there is a place, a repository, a place where you can find the information so that doesn't have to be too much double work. I mean, that is a waste of resources that nobody needs, that PCRs and LCAs have to be calculated lots of times. And following on that, a harmonized standard for PCRs would also be on the wish list, the kind of global PCR idea. And I would wish for that actually there would be in 5 years' time at least globally accepted PCRs in 500 major product categories. So, that's a bold statement, but if you don't aim high, I've learned it's difficult. If you aim high, on the other hand, if you don't quite manage and you only create 300 or 400, that's already a good result. And then the establishment of the widely adopted best practice in environmental labeling. So I would hope that all the experiences being made in France and in other places would actually lead to some kind of best practice in communication that can be adopted, adapted, and rolled out into different markets. Thank you very much.